who would like to kick us off? Please, the interim director of the National Library, I think.
It is. Thank you, Helen. My name is Catherine McSharry, and I'd like to say thank you very much to all the panellists. Incredibly stimulating and thought-provoking series of presentations. I was struck and very reassured by the emphasis throughout on kind of quality of life and values issues, well-being, sustainability, ethics, and so on. And I've also been struck through the day on the emphasis on digital and its affordances and its possibilities. And John's phrase at the end there about the sometimes contradictory forces distilled something for me that has been nagging at me, and I'd love to get other colleagues' perspective on, which is the increasing body of evidence that the way we're engaging in a digital world is profoundly damaging to our physical and mental well-being, and how that sits alongside the understanding of its possibilities and affordances. And what does that mean for us as libraries? What are our responsibilities? How do we develop what we do in the light of that, if we do? And what does it mean in terms of the skills for our staff and our users in navigating that reality?
Okay. Who's going to take a stab at that? John?
Thank you. I have a go, but it's a great point, Catherine. And I suppose I bring a bit of bias just. I'm trying to overcome that. I kind of hinted in my own piece that I kind of disapprove of this kind of fragmented learning myself. I feel it should be more concentrated. But I suppose to try and get to your point, I just think we have a huge challenge, but it has to be, I suppose, us in partnership with academics and others to kind of promote that kind of critical sense of information and digital literacy, and try and point the way. I don't really have obvious answers. I kind of hope Kira, who mentioned a bit of that earlier, might be able to help me out a bit. Other than that, I think it's got to be a partnership, that's for sure. In that sense of kind of slowing down, standing back, and being a bit more critical.
Kira?
Yeah, I think I am thinking about it a lot, and it's hard to miss headlines around mental health and digital and all that. But I do think that not all digital interaction is bad. And we're just not clear, I think, on what is bad and what isn't. So I see, again, my kids interacting digitally on Discord when they're playing games with each other from all over the place, shouting at each other. And it seems very healthy and very positive. I wouldn't do it, but this is the world that this generation are in. So I don't know that all digital, I think we just have to figure out what is positive digital interaction and give more of that. And then really probe what is negative digital interaction. And I kind of alluded to some of that in my talk.
Stuart?
I think it was an interesting and very complex question. There's a couple of things that come to mind. The one is around embodied experience and the digital. And I think we perhaps have, there was a really interesting article a little while ago published about user experience in libraries that basically said this is so ableist, it's unbelievable. And it's also so very white and privileged in terms of its understanding of people. And I wonder if we perhaps do that in our understanding of the digital. If we talk about augmented reality, we talk about VR, we talk about XR, are we thinking about it in terms of an ableist experience? So I wonder if there's something more that we might need to unpack there. The other one, I think through the pandemic, as we heard earlier on, that I think we did a good digital transition, but I don't think we've done a digital transformation. We picked up analog behaviour and quickly threw it into a digital environment, but we haven't had time, or we're only finding time and space to reflect on that now, to think about what is generally transformative. And we can think about that in terms of all sorts of experience, but I think we make a mistake when we miss the person out, the lived experience of the library in its totality. But I think your question is exactly right, and I don't think there's a ready answer to any of the points you raised.
Thanks, Catherine. It's excellent. I can't see. Over that side, sorry.
Hi, Marta Bustillo, Digital Learning Librarian at UCD Library. Thank you, Catherine, for asking the question that was in my mind already. I'm going to be cheeky and direct you to the UCD Library's Digital Wellbeing tutorial. But here's my question, which was originally addressed at Stuart mostly. But after listening to John's presentation and really thinking about all of your contributions, it's probably something that you can all think about at least, which is the elephant in the room. We're all agreeing that the future is digital, that the present is digital. We're all agreeing that sustainable development goals are an important thing, that mental health and well-being are an important thing, that democracy is an important thing. And yet here we are, reliant on these massive data centers that are in the hands of very few players, which has implications for democracy and for climate change, because those data centers are really noxious to the environment. And what are we doing about this?
Thank you. Great question, particularly in the Irish context, as you know, as a centre for data centres. And just to add in that some of the energy suppliers are now they've just refused 10 new data centres because then of the energy crisis.
I think you're exactly right. Digital is not sustainable. Certainly not the way it is at the moment. It's not offering the best sustainability solution. So I think we perhaps need to think about that, and that's really why the always-on culture that we were told was so great back in the noughties, is that so good now, particularly as we think about just the costs of running buildings and the impact on the environment. And I'm sorry, there was a bit you said early on while you were asking the question I thought was fantastic, and I wanted to answer it, and I'm sorry I've forgotten the first part of your question.
The idea that we are interested in democracy and that obviously we all agree that democracy is a good thing, and yet we are trusting our data to an increasingly diminishing number of data providers.
Yeah, great. Thank you. That's kind of what I tried to allude to with the notion of the information commons and open. There's some movement, interesting, in architecture and building, which is about making open building, so that that's not proprietary, so that the idea of designing things is actually owned in common. And I think open research is a step in the right direction to that, which a word I don't like to use is disruption, but I think it poses some interesting challenges to the main players. It's really clear that there's a lot of, particularly at the moment, horizontal integration going on with a lot of land grab by some very large organizations. But we, as creators and custodians of knowledge, have got a really key part to play. If we stop thinking about paying to read, but we pay to publish our own stuff, as a community, how do we start to change that environment?
Okay. This may be the last question. Do we have any hands up? Well, I think on that note, those were two fabulous questions. So, round of applause for the audience. And then an even greater round of applause, please, for our panellists.